She screamed in pain. Then the millionaire took her hand and said, "I still love you, asterisk." The satellite phone crackled to life as Victoria Sterling adjusted her climbing harness on the rocky ledge. Snow whipped around her face, but the familiar rush of adrenaline from the ascent had been perfect until now. She glanced at the caller ID, and her heart stopped. "Dr. Sterling, we have a medical emergency requiring your immediate assistance." The dispatcher's voice cut through the mountain wind. "Helicopter crash in Sector 7, approximately 2 miles from your current location. Multiple casualties, 1 critical." Victoria's hands trembled as she secured her gear. She was supposed to be on vacation, finally taking time away from the endless stream of trauma cases at Metropolitan General. The mountains had always been her sanctuary, the place where she could forget the weight of life and death decisions. "I'm a trauma surgeon, not a wilderness medic," she replied, already knowing she would go anyway. "What's the situation?" "Billionaire tech mogul Marcus Blackwood and his pilot. Pilot is stable, but Blackwood has severe internal bleeding. We can't get a rescue helicopter up there in this weather." The phone slipped from Victoria's grip, dangling by its cord. Marcus, after 3 years of carefully avoiding any mention of his name in the press, any event where they might cross paths, fate had thrown them together in the most impossible circumstances. She closed her eyes, remembering the last time she'd seen him. The fight that ended everything. His accusations that she cared more about her career than their relationship. Her own painful admission that maybe he was right. "Dr. Sterling, are you there?" "Yes," she managed. "Send me the coordinates. I'm coming down." The descent was treacherous. Made worse by her racing thoughts. Marcus had been the one man who'd made her question everything. Their relationship had been a whirlwind of private jets, late-night surgeries he'd wade through, stolen moments between their demanding careers. He'd proposed on a beach in Santorini, the ring hidden in a seashell he'd found during their morning walk. She'd said no. Not because she didn't love him, but because she knew loving him meant choosing between the woman she was and the woman he needed her to be. His world demanded a partner who could attend galas, host dinner parties, and smile gracefully while he built his empire. Her world demanded everything she had to give. The crash site appeared through the swirling snow like a nightmare made real. The helicopter lay crumpled against a granite outcropping, its rotors twisted into impossible angles. She could see the pilot, conscious and waving weakly from where he'd been thrown clear. But Marcus was still inside. Victoria ran toward the wreckage, her medical training taking over. Through the shattered windscreen, she could see him slumped. Against his seat, blood staining his shirt. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. "Marcus," she whispered, then louder. "Marcus, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, focusing on her with difficulty. For a moment, confusion crossed his features, then something that might have been relief. "Victoria?" His voice was barely audible over the wind. "Am I dead? Because seeing you here seems impossible." "You're not dead," she said firmly, already assessing his injuries through the gap in the windscreen. "But you're going to be if I don't get you out of there? Can you move your legs?" He tried, wincing. "Everything hurts." "That's actually a good sign." She forced her voice to remain steady, professional. Inside, her heart was breaking all over again. Victoria worked quickly to extract Marcus from the wreckage, her hands steady despite the emotional storm raging inside her. The pilot, James, had a broken leg but was stable enough to help guide her through the helicopter's emergency systems. "There's a survival shelter about half a mile up the ridge," James gasped through chattering teeth, stocked with supplies. "I can make it there, but he looked at Marcus, who was losing consciousness again. "I'll take care of him," Victoria said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Get to the shelter and radio for help when the storm passes." As James limped away into the white void, Victoria was left alone with the man who had once been her everything. She'd managed to stop the worst of the bleeding, but Marcus needed surgery, and soon. The nearest hospital was hours away by helicopter. Possible in this weather. She'd have to operate here in the wilderness. With nothing but her emergency medical kit and whatever supplies she could salvage from the helicopter. "Why did you leave?" Marcus whispered as she worked to stabilize him for transport to a more sheltered location. His eyes were clearer now, focused on her face with an intensity that made her hands shake. "This isn't the time for that conversation," she replied, but he caught her wrist gently. "I thought I was going to die up there," he said, "and all I could think about was that last night. It's the things we said to each other. The way you looked at me when you gave me back the ring." Victoria closed her eyes, the memory as sharp as broken glass. They'd been at his penthouse, the city sprawling below them like a galaxy of lights. She'd just returned from a 72-hour shift, exhausted and covered in the weight of the lives she'd fought to save. Marcus had been frustrated. Having waited for her at a charity gala where he'd planned to announce their engagement, "You chose them over me," he'd said, gesturing toward the hospital where she'd just spent 3 days fighting a bus accident with multiple casualties. "You always choose them over me." "Those people needed me," she'd replied, her voice breaking. "Children, Marcus, families. How can I choose between saving lives and having dinner with your investors?" "I needed you too," he'd whispered. Now, in the howling wind of the mountain storm, she understood something she'd been too proud to admit then. They'd both been right and they'd both been wrong. "I was scared," she admitted, helping him to his feet. "I was scared that loving you meant becoming someone I wasn't. Your world, Marcus. It's so different from mine." "I never wanted you to change," he said, leaning heavily against her as they made their way toward a natural windbreak in the rocks. "I fell in love with the woman who would rather save lives than attend parties. I just wanted to be important to you too." They found a sheltered spot among the boulders, and Victoria spread out the emergency bivouac she'd brought. The wind still howled around them, but here they had some protection from the worst of it. "You were important to me," she said softly, checking his pulse again. "You were the most important thing in my world. That's why it terrified me." Marcus's hand found hers in the dim light. "I watched you operate once. Did you know that? I came to the hospital to surprise you for lunch and they said you were in surgery. I watched through the observation window as you saved a little girl's life. You were so focused, so completely in your element. I realized then that I'd never seen you more beautiful." Victoria felt tears threatening. "And why did you want me to give it up?" "I just wanted to find a way to be part of that world instead of competing with it." The storm raged around them, but in their small shelter, something was shifting. 3 years of hurt and misunderstanding were beginning to crack open, revealing the love that had never really died. As night fell, the temperature dropped dangerously. Victoria had done what she could with Marcus's injuries, but he needed real medical attention soon. She'd fashioned a makeshift from supplies in her kit and the helicopter's first aid supplies. But his internal bleeding was still a concern. "Your hands are freezing," Marcus noticed as she checked his bandages. Without waiting for her protest, he pulled her closer, sharing his body heat under the emergency blanket. "Remember our first camping trip? Despite everything?" Victoria smiled. "You brought a 4-person tent for a weekend trip and enough gourmet food to feed an army." "I wanted to impress you," he admitted, his breath warm against her ear. "I'd never been with someone who actually preferred sleeping under the stars to 5-star hotels." They'd met at a medical conference where Marcus was the keynote speaker, talking about how technology could revolutionize healthcare. Victoria had been in the audience, initially skeptical of another tech billionaire who thought money could solve everything. But when she'd challenged him during the Q&A session about the human element of medicine, he'd listened.
I really listened.
"I fell in love with you that night," Marcus said quietly. "I'd at the conference, but later when you took me to that little diner and we talked until sunrise about everything except business." Victoria remembered. She'd been surprised when he'd asked to continue their conversation over coffee. Even more surprised when he genuinely wanted to understand her perspective on medicine versus technology. They'd talked about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. She'd told him about growing up in a small town where the nearest hospital was an hour away, watching her grandfather die because they couldn't get him help in time. "That's when I knew I wanted to be a surgeon," she'd said. "I wanted to be the person who could buy time, who could fix what was broken." Marcus had understood. His own drive came from growing up poor, watching his mother clean offices at night. To pay for his education, success meant security, meant never being powerless again. We're more alike than different, he said now, his voice growing weaker. We both chose careers that consume us because we're driven by the same thing. We want to matter. We want to make a difference. Victoria felt his forehead. He was developing a fever, which meant infection was setting in. She administered the last of her antibiotics, knowing it might not be enough. Marcus, I need you to stay awake, she said urgently. Talk to me. Tell me about what you've been doing these past 3 years. He struggled to focus on her face. Built a medical research facility. Funded trauma centers in rural areas. Places like where you grew up. His eyes met hers. I kept thinking about that night at the diner, about your grandfather. Victoria's breath caught. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was angry. Because my pride was hurt. Because I wanted you to come back to me. Not because of what I was building, but because you missed what we had. She leaned closer, her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat irregular and fast. I did miss it. I missed you every single day. Why? His voice was barely a whisper. Why did you really leave? Victoria was quiet for a long moment, listening to the wind howl around their shelter. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw with honesty. Because I was falling apart. She admitted, I was so in love with you that I was losing myself. Every time you looked disappointed when I had to leave for an emergency. Every time I saw you at those events without me. I felt like I was failing at being the woman you deserved. And every time I was in surgery, I was thinking about you instead of my patients. I was scared I was going to make a mistake, that someone would die because I was distracted by love. Marcus's hand found her face in the darkness, his thumb tracing her cheek. I never wanted you to choose. I know that now, she whispered. But then, I thought love meant sacrifice. I thought one of us had to give up everything for the other. What do you think now? Before she could answer, his eyes fluttered closed, and his breathing became shallow. Victoria's medical training kicked in, but her heart was screaming. Dawn broke gray and forbidding, the storm finally beginning to ease, but Marcus's condition deteriorating rapidly. Victoria had managed to keep him stable through the night, but his pulse was weakening and his skin had taken on a pale, clammy quality that terrified her. The radio crackled to life. Dr. Sterling, this is Mountain Rescue. We have eyes on your location. Weather's clearing enough for extraction, but we need to move fast. Another storm system's moving in. Victoria looked at Marcus is unconscious now, for the past hour. Moving him was dangerous, but staying put meant certain death. I'm going to get you out of here, she whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. I'm not losing you again. The rescue helicopter appeared like salvation against the clearing sky. The team worked efficiently, but Victoria could see the concern in their eyes as they loaded Marcus onto the stretcher. His vitals are deteriorating, the flight medic reported. We need to get him to surgery immediately. Metropolitan General has the best trauma unit, Victoria said, climbing into the helicopter. I can have them prep OR3. Doc, the medic, said gently. Metro's 40 minutes away. Valley General is 15. He might not have 40 minutes. Victoria's heart clenched. Valley General was a good hospital, but she didn't know their trauma team. She wasn't credentialed there. She would have to trust Marcus's life to strangers. Take him to Valley, she decided. Radiohead. Tell them Dr. Victoria Sterling is incoming with a critical patient and requesting surgical privileges for emergency care. The flight seemed to last forever, and no time at all. Victoria held Marcus's hand, monitoring his vitals, whispering encouragement that she hoped somehow reached him. The city spread below them, morning traffic beginning to flow through the streets where normal people were starting normal days. Unaware that the most important person in Victoria's world was fighting for his life, Marcus, she said urgently, as his blood pressure dropped again, you have to fight. You have to stay with me. There's so much we still need to say to each other. His eyes fluttered open briefly, focusing on her face with effort. Victoria, I'm here, she said, squeezing. His hand, I'm not going anywhere. The ring, he whispered. I still have it in my desk drawer. Never could bring myself to return it. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face. Save your strength. Tell me about it later. What if there isn't a later? There will be, she said fiercely. There has. To be, the helicopter touched down at Valley General, and the trauma team was waiting. Victoria gave a rapid-fire briefing as they rushed toward the OR, but at the doors, a nurse stopped her. "I'm sorry, doctor, but you're not credentialed here." "You can't. He's my patient," Victoria said, her voice deadly quiet. "I've been treating him for 18 hours. I know his condition better than anyone." "Dr. Sterling," a voice called from behind them. Victoria turned to see Dr. Patricia Kim, a surgeon she'd trained with during residency. "What are you doing here?" "Patricia, thank God. This is Marcus Blackwood. Internal bleeding, possible splenic laceration. He's been stable, but he's crashing." Patricia looked between Victoria and the unconscious man on the stretcher, understanding immediately that this was more than just a medical case. "Get her scrubbed in," Patricia ordered the nurse. "Dr. Sterling, you're with me?" In the OR, Victoria's hands were steady as she worked alongside Patricia to repair the damage. Spleen was badly damaged, requiring removal, and there was significant bleeding from a liver laceration. It was delicate, painstaking work, but Victoria felt more focused than she had in years. "Beautiful work," Patricia murmured as they finished the final sutures. "He's lucky you were there." Victoria watched Marcus's vitals stabilize on the monitors, finally allowing herself to breathe. We both were. 3 days later, Victoria sat beside Marcus's hospital bed, reading a medical journal while he slept. The morning sun streamed through the windows, and for the first time since the accident, she felt hope instead of fear. "You know," Marcus said, his voice hoarse but stronger, "most people read novels when they're keeping vigil." Victoria looked up, setting aside the journal with a smile. "Most people aren't trauma surgeons. How are you feeling?" "Like I was hit by a helicopter," he said, attempting to sit up. Victoria was immediately at his side, adjusting his pillows. "But alive, thanks." "To you?" "Thanks to modern medicine and a very skilled surgical team," she corrected. "Victoria." He caught her hand, his grip weak but determined. "We need to talk about what happened up there, what we said to each other." Victoria had been dreading and longing for this conversation in equal measure. "Marcus, you almost died. Maybe we should focus on your recovery first." "I almost died, and the only thing I could think about was how much time we've wasted," he said. 3 years, Victoria. 3 years we could have been figuring this out together, instead of being too proud and scared to try. She sat on the edge of his bed, careful not to disturb his fourth lines. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "I'm still the same person who works 60-hour weeks and gets called away at all hours. Still going to choose my patients when they need me. And I'm still going to build companies and travel and have obligations that take me away from home," Marcus replied. "But I'm also the man who spent 3 years funding trauma centers because the woman he loved told him about her grandfather. I'm the man who learned that loving someone doesn't mean changing them." Victoria felt her defenses crumbling. "What are you saying?" Marcus struggled to reach the bedside table, and Victoria helped him open the drawer. Inside was a small velvet box, worn from handling. "I'm saying that I don't want a wife who gives up her dreams for mine," he said, opening the box to reveal the ring she'd given back 3 years ago. "I want a partner who challenges me, who makes me better, who saves lives while I'm building the future. I want you exactly as you are." Victoria stared at the ring, the same emerald-cut diamond that had once represented everything she thought she couldn't have. "Marcus, ... I've learned some things these past 3 years," he continued. "I've learned that love isn't about being together every moment. It's about building something together that's bigger than either of us alone. I've learned that I'd rather have you for stolen moments between surgeries than have anyone else for a lifetime. And I've learned," Victoria said softly, "that running away from love doesn't make you stronger. It just makes you alone." She took the ring from the box, studying it in the sunlight. "If I say yes this time, things will be different. I'll still be called away. I'll still choose my patients when they need me. There will be missed dinners and interrupted vacations, and I'll be there when you come home," Marcus interrupted. "I'll wait through your surgeries. I'll be proud of you at medical conferences. I'll build hospitals while you save lives in them." Victoria looked into his eyes, seeing not the demanding man who had wanted her to change, but the partner who had learned to love her dreams as much as his own. "Yes," she whispered, sliding the ring onto her finger. "Yes, I'll marry you." Marcus pulled her down for a kiss that tasted of second chances and new beginnings. When they broke apart, Victoria was laughing through her tears. "So what now?" she asked. "How do we make this work?" "Figure it out as we go," Marcus said. "Together. No more running, no more ultimatums, just us, building something beautiful." Outside the hospital window, the city hummed with life. Somewhere in the building, Victoria knew, other doctors were fighting to save lives. Other families were praying for miracles. And somewhere in the mountains, the storm had passed, leaving the peaks clean and bright under the morning sun. Had found their way back to each other not in spite of who they were, but because of it. And this time, Victoria knew they were both ready for the adventure of loving without limits.